Simply Financial with Christopher Calandra, Certified Financial Planner, is an innovative, comprehensive, informative, and cutting-edge podcast that discusses financial topics ranging from personal finance, economics, politics, and personal growth. Simply Financial will cover intriguing and thought-provoking questions so that the listener can simply increase their financial IQ.
Welcome to the Simply Financial podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Calandra. This is episode number 20 of season number 3. And if you listened to last week's episode, I introduced the first of a 5-part series titled Battle of the Sexes. This is part 2 in that series. And so for the first couple of episodes of the series, the first 3 in fact, I'm going to have my wife Joelle join me, and we're talking about, first and foremost, money and marriage, just kind of a roundtable discussion on money questions inside of a marriage. And then we're going to be doing an episode about teaching kids about money. And then the final 2 episodes in the 5-part series are going to be Lindy Brock, part of the team here at Elliott Wealth Management, getting her thoughts, and she and I discussing some of the same topics, money in a relationship, as well as kids with money. So thanks again, Joelle, for taking some time to sit down with your husband and do the podcast. You've never done the podcasts. I've been fortunate. I've done some media. I do the radio show. I've done the podcast. I've been a guest on other people's podcasts. I've done some television. This is your first. So were you nervous at all when we did the first episode?
No, not really.
No?
No.
Are you nervous now?
No, not at all.
All right. So it was a good discussion. The first part of the 5-part series, we covered a lot of ground. And so what I wanted to start this episode with is, I'm a financial advisor. So I meet with often couples. It could be single individuals, could be divorced, widows. It runs the spectrum. But I'm meeting with I'm meeting with couples. What advice would you give me in working with couples to try and be fair to both parties and to facilitate conversations about their goals and objectives and help them come up with a plan so they could win with money? Any thoughts on how I should handle things? And the reason why I ask Joelle is because you and I have been in situations where we're on the other side of the table and somebody is meeting with us. And sometimes those meetings go well, and sometimes the expert, whether it's a tradesman or furniture salesperson or whatever, it doesn't go so well. So what advice would you give me? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's hard to say, because my first thing would say is to know your audience. But that's hard for you because you might not know your audience right away. In that respect, I think it's hard because you want to cater it to the people. So when somebody sits down with us and they start talking to us about buying the car, and then they start talking about things that don't mean anything to us. For instance, when we bought the car and we sat down to sign all the paperwork, these people were crazy. And we had all this paperwork to do and all this stuff to do. And for us, we are people that our time is precious, and we try not to take advantage of other people's time, where I felt like if that guy was a lot more organized in his thoughts and in his practice, buying that car could have taken half an hour instead of an hour and a half.
Right. They wasted I know exactly. She's talking about when we bought her car, which we talked about in the first episode. So we had bought her car. We had agreed on everything with the dealership. We were trading in a car. There was no financing. We were trading in the car. We were going to give them the check, and we were going to buy the car. We made an appointment to go and pick up the car. You know, we'd have to do the paperwork to buy the car and give them the check. But everything was worked out beforehand. And I thought we would go in, sign some paperwork. They would give us a little primer on the car, how everything works, and then we would be out. And we were there for, 3 hours?
It was ridiculous. The guy was printing out the paperwork while we were there, organizing them, putting them in piles, pushing piles aside, printing out more paperwork. And that to me is annoying. You're wasting people's time. So my advice for you, just based on something like that, would be to be organized in your thoughts, have an action list, have questions. Maybe they're different for younger people as opposed to older people, as opposed to married couples or widows or divorced. But know your audience, know what you're going into, where you're not wasting people's time.
That's
but
good.
You also want to make them feel the love and that you are interested in them and you want to help them.
So in that instance, how annoyed was I in the dealership?
Yeah, it was terrible. I would never buy a car from them again, or in retrospect, I would call ahead and say, listen, we're coming in. Are you going to be organized with everything and not printing out? And
it's such a shame, but this is a tangent, but from a business perspective, they ruined it because the whole process up to that point was good. We were happy with the car. We were happy with the trade-in. We were happy with our salesperson. It was a good process. We walked in there excited, and we were pleased. We were happy customers. And that experience at the end, there was so much friction, it ruined the buying experience. And at least for me, I would be tempted not to buy again from them, not because of price or the quality of the product or the sales process, but that final piece was just so bad that I probably wouldn't go back there. And they ruined it at the last moment, and it's such a shame because it was within their control.
And they must have printed out, no joke, 2,500 pieces of paper.
It was terrible. I was so aggravated. What do you think, I know I'm jumping around, what do you think about prenups? If years ago I would have said, we need to do a prenup. Now, we were really young when we got married, but what do you think about prenups?
That's an interesting question because, I could say if you had a prenup, that's not cool, but if I had a prenup, that's pretty cool. So I think it's a hard decision. I have to say that if you had a prenup, I think it would be okay. I think I would understand. We were very young, getting married. We had a lot ahead of us. Things change, people change, and I think I would understand that. However, on the other side of it, I would also say that after a few years, can a prenup be torn up?
Yes. Both parties could, in writing, agree to void the prenup, yes.
I think once there's kids involved and there's, you've gone through so many years, I think a prenup is okay, but maybe you say along the lines, like once we have children, once we get settled, that prenup goes away.
Okay. To be fair, though, we were young, and I was good financially as a young person, probably better than most people my age, but I wasn't a multimillionaire or some...
No.
It was, So I think with prenups, I think second marriages, that comes more into play, and I think if there's a huge difference between one person's wealth and the other person's wealth that was accumulated before the marriage, that kind of lends itself to a prenup. We weren't in that situation. I mean, we got married in our early to mid-20s, and we were just starting out, and that really wasn't applicable. But I would say if there was ever an occasion, and God willing there wouldn't be, and there was a second marriage, I think I would strongly consider a prenup for myself. But I wouldn't say it's necessarily a bad thing, although I think at 23, 24, if I would have said we need to do a prenup, I don't know if you would have been as open as you're projecting here on the show. That would have been out of left field, no?
Yeah.
Would have definitely been. So along those lines, when we got married, today it's very popular, and I find this, Joelle, is in meeting with lots of people, especially, millennials, individuals that are younger than you and I, we're 47 and 48, is they do their finances separately, even within a marriage. And sometimes that's because it's second marriages with children from previous marriages or previous relationships. But even in the classic no children, first marriage, get married, they're often keeping their finances separate. We did not do that. When we got married, we combined all of the finances, and from the get-go, that's just how it always was. Thinking back on that, would it have been weird for us, not passing judgment on anybody else, but would it have been weird for us to keep money separate? What do you think about that?
I think it just complicates everything. I'm a simple person, and those are a lot of books to balance.
So you're just looking at it from the reconciling.
No, I just think that, say you have a checking account, I have a checking account, and then we have a joint checking account. I think that's what most people do. So therefore, that have separate money. Therefore, you would take money, and I would take money, and we put the same amount of money into that joint checking account, and that checking account would maybe take care of the household bills, this, whatever. But then in my checking account, I could go shopping for myself and do something else. I don't know. it baffles me. Not to judge anybody, I just don't understand how that works. It doesn't seem easy for me.
And it's always worked for us. From day one, we were a team, and regardless of who made the money or who brought debt into the relationship, and it was always just a team. Everything was together, and that's really worked for us. And I think there's academic studies that show that that's probably the best choice most of the time, although that might be changing today with so many people doing it differently. I heard a funny interview, Joelle, with a woman that was talking about they did that model. There's mine, yours, and ours. So they would have, like you said, their checking account where maybe their paycheck went in, and then their spouse would have a paycheck that their account that their paycheck went in, and then there would be a common account that they would each throw money in. And some bills he would handle, some bills she would handle, and then some bills would be paid out of the joint account. And she was just talking about this, and she said it got to be silly because we'd go out to dinner and it'd be like, well, it's my turn to pay for dinner. And the next time, but it's like, difference doesn't make. We're married, we're on the same team. This is silly.
I think it just lends itself to other things because now, I don't know, now it seems like they're secretives. They're secrets, right? Because I don't know exactly what you're doing in your checking account. You have no idea what I'm doing in my checking account. Maybe I have more money than you think. Maybe I have less money than you think. I don't know. It just seems silly to me.
I would agree with you. If people ask me as a professional, or if people just asked me my advice, I would say in most instances, and there are exceptions, separate marriages with children, and there might be reasons to do it separately, but I would say most of the time, the most optimal decision would be to combine finances, and that's my opinion. I think, for example, when Lindy comes on, I'm pretty sure her and her husband DJ do it mine, yours, and ours model.
I think a lot
so
of
we'll
people
talk
do.
about that. But that's always worked for us. And one of the
wait, not to interrupt you, but I do have my own checking account that
Yes.
I get my own paycheck.
Right.
That I deposit money into. But you go on the internet and transfer the money into our account.
So, yes,
So
that's true.
how does that work exactly?
So, yeah, Joelle has a side hustle and she brings in some money, but I'm joint on that account because we're joint on everything.
Yes.
And I probably do more activity in that account and really control that money, if you will.
As soon as I deposit it, you take it out.
Yes. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay.
Not really. So, which brings me to the next question, because you mentioned like secretive. I've heard the term financial infidelity. So there's infidelity where within a relationship, somebody steps out of the relationship with another party. But then there's this term that's developed, and I didn't hear that much over the course of my career until recently, but this financial infidelity, where somebody lies about money, where, they might have a gambling habit, or they might have a sum of money that the spouse doesn't know about, or it could be as modest as, a spouse goes on a shopping spree and then hides the bill from their spouse, things like that, which doesn't seem like infidelity.
I hide packages, though.
Yeah, you hide packages, which I think is common. But, so how do you feel about financial infidelity? Like, we're very open, and I think that's the most healthy thing, and that's the advice I would give is you should be open with your partner, but a lot of people aren't, and I know some women that have money that their husbands don't know about, and I have seen husbands, do things with money that they hide from their spouse. What do you think about that?
That's interesting because it brings me back to a long time ago. I was young, and it was a family friend that the husband never filed the tax return.
Oh, yeah.
For years and years and years and years and years. And the wife didn't know. And so they came to have all of this debt upon them once the IRS found them. And I just find that very baffling to me that, back in the day you had to sign it. Now you can electronically sign it.
Sure.
So it's different. However, I get an email and you get an email, so we each do have to sign it.
Yes.
Electronically. But this person, the woman, didn't occur to her on April 15th that in years she never signed a tax return.
Right.
And that being said, other money was being taken, other things were going on, and it really could ruin a marriage. It could. It didn't, but it could.
That qualifies as marriage infidelity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not like, hey, I went to Macy's or Nordstrom's and I bought a few things and, I'm just kind of keep it on the DL. I don't think you should do that, but that's pretty slight. But something as severe as not filing your taxes.
And I don't know personally if he said he did and he didn't or whatever. I don't really know. But also as a wife, you have to sign it.
Yes. So I think you would agree that over the course of our marriage, we've been always very open, and there haven't been secrets unless maybe one or both of us are keeping secrets, but that really hasn't come into play. We joke. I usually have a little stash of money because I travel, and I would never want to be caught without money in a business situation or any other situation for that matter. So I have my little stash of money, but she knows where the stash is. And at times my stash has gotten eaten into a bit.
I think the kids might even know where it is at this point.
So, I mean, it's not that secretive. And it's also not
that much money.
An amount of money. I know one wife who keeps money from their husband because they don't agree on money. And he's a spender, she's a saver. And she doesn't agree with his approach, but she kind of lets him handle things. But she has like $60,000 in a savings account he doesn't know about.
I know somebody like that too.
That's marriage infidelity.
I know somebody like that too.
I don't think it's the same person.
I don't think it's not either.
Oh.
I don't think you know who it is.
I want to know though. Don't say anything now. So one of the single biggest cause of divorce is money fights. And so we've had some fights about money, including our first fight as a married couple was over money fight.
Yes.
Right? So I was running a checkbook, and when I was single, I would run my checkbook down to basically zero. Money would come in, I would pay bills, I would save and invest, and I would run my checking account almost down to zero because I didn't need a lot of money. I was a single guy, and that's how I would do things. Well, then after we got married, I would do the same thing, but now there was more money coming in, and I was more interested in building wealth and saving and investing, including for our home that I wanted to buy so we could move out of the condo. And I ran the checking account down low like I normally do. And Joelle, why don't you tell everybody what happened?
Well, at that point, you didn't have a stash of cash either.
Right.
So that might have changed after that day.
Yes.
But my niece came a knocking on the door. She was about 4 or 5 and wanted to sell me some Girl Scout cookies. So I wanted to buy 3 boxes of Girl Scout cookies from her. I needed, at the time, maybe $30 or something, so maybe I wanted to buy more. I don't remember. I owed her $35 for Girl Scout cookies. I didn't have $35. I didn't have any cash. I couldn't write her a check. I had no money to give my niece. It was so embarrassing. And I said to Chris, I can't believe that we don't have any money in the checking account. He said, well, wait, this is good. This is good. How much money do you keep as a buffer? I said, I always kept $1,000 as a buffer. Always. He's like, well, that's ridiculous. We're not doing that. So that wasn't even a conversation. It was like, we're just not doing that. That's just too much money. So I said, well, what if I needed this? What if I need that? He's like, you have a credit card. You can always use your credit card. I said, well, my niece doesn't take credit cards. So now I can't give her any money, and I can't buy these Girl Scout cookies. So it was a big fight. I started throwing statements at him with all the money we had, but I didn't have any cash to give her. So, yeah, it was an interesting fight. And so now we keep cash.
Joelle is very kind because it was way more energetic than she's letting on. It was
kind of heated.
It was very heated. And over the course of time, she has handily won that debate because now we keep a sizable amount of money as a buffer, even more than what was debated.
Yes.
Probably still less than what a lot of people would be comfortable with. So I've still...
Yeah, well, that was back when we had absolutely...
Correct.
Not a lot of...
And we keep cash on hands. And she was right. It was different than when I was a young, dumb, single guy compared to married. And then when you bring children into the mix and you have a household with different things that come up. So that was our first fight.
Yes, and I remember we were having his parents come over for dinner that day. And that's always fun when you have to pretend you actually like each other and sit down with your in-laws.
Yes, when we're not talking.
Yes.
Yeah, good stuff. So how would you, if you were giving advice to someone about the fighting, we playfully talk about it, and it is going to happen. It's inevitable. But Any thoughts on fighting fair when it comes to money and finances? Because I would say, I'll give you my answer, that fighting fair is, first off, going back to what we talked about in part one of this, is if one party doesn't know anything about the finances, that increases the chances you're going to have fights. Because if you don't have an appreciation for how things are working, even if it's not good news, you're more apt to have a fight, but the basis of the fight may not be based in reality because you don't know what's going on. And so that would tie into what we talked about before. There should be checks and balances, a way that's appropriate within the confines of your relationship where you have an awareness of what's going on money-wise. That alone will go a long way to cutting down on fights, or when you have fights, you're at least coming off of a common basis as opposed to somebody that's completely in the dark. What do you think?
Yeah, I would say that would be appropriate.
Because there's been times when we've had disagreements where I want to do something or propose doing something and you're reluctant. I think I'm more of a risk taker. We said in part one that we're both savers. I think my appetite for risk is greater than your appetite for risk by a pretty wide margin.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, in terms of having our rainy day fund,
sure,
I would like it to be a lot more than it was, and now it is.
Right.
But that took some time to get to you because you kept investing and doing things, which is fine. It was liquid. We could get to it if we had to, but I would have liked just a rainy day fund that was just a little bit bigger, a little bigger cushion to make me feel better when I put my head in the pillow at night.
And I will say candidly that it was a mistake for me not to honor your interest in having more security. It was a mistake. Not because I necessarily agree with you on needing it, but I don't need to agree with you. It's something that makes you feel more comfortable, more secure, even though you buy into my intellectual responses on why we don't need it. I should have done what you wanted to do much earlier than I did. It would have been better for you and better for me. It was definitely a mistake. But there were times when there were certain deals and things that I wanted to do, and when you expressed concerns about those, we would sit down and we would go through the rationale. And I know you talked on part one about when we were in our starter home and we were going to move to the bigger home, that you had doubts about whether we were ready to do it. And we did sit down and went through the checkbook and went through the investments and the cash flow and had an idea of the budget. And then at the end, we were in agreement. I didn't bring you kicking and screaming to the table to buy the home, which we've been in now for 18 years. But you did need some convincing. And it wasn't exactly a fight, but it could have been. But because we knew where we were money-wise and we had a basis to kind of work off of, we were able to negotiate through that pretty well, I think.
Yes. Yeah, agreed.
Any other thoughts about money fights?
I don't think so.
So this is a question. I think it's a tee-up. So it's, what do you most admire about your financial acumen? So I would say for you is neither one of us, I think, are terribly materialistic. We live very nice lives. We do very well for ourselves, and we've been blessed to accumulate wealth, and again, we do very well. But I don't think we're overly materialistic, especially not in a showy way. But one of the things I admire about you is your reasonableness when it comes to money, where you're not so tight with money that we don't get a chance to enjoy it. And yet you're not so reckless with money that you spend money that would prevent us from accumulating wealth and achieving our financial goals. You're very reasonable in terms of money, and I respect that a lot. I've met Joelle as I've met all kinds of people. There's some people I meet, it's like, well, you got to enjoy some money. Like it's, you might be a great client for us because you have the first nickel you ever earned. But boy, you only go around once. You have to enjoy your life. And then I've met the other extreme where they say you only live once, and they're so worried about missing out on something that they're reckless with their money and put themselves at tremendous risk. But I admire that a lot about you because we've enjoyed the heck out of our money over the years. but yet we've also played by the rules that I espouse to clients, and we've accumulated wealth and put money away for college and retirement, and we've been responsible with debt, and we've been paying off debt at a really fast clip lately. So that's what I admire about you.
Well, thank you. It doesn't seem to be that we live below our means, but I think we do live below our means, but I think it's our means are where we want to be. And
Right.
we live a life that we enjoy, and we get to do a lot of nice things, which is wonderful for me. And what I think about your financial acumen is you have this goal, and you adjust it along the way, but you have a goal, and you work hard for that goal, and it has afforded us a nice lifestyle because I've been able to stay home with the kids because you have this financial acumen of a goal, and you set it and you work hard for it, and it makes it work for our family. And I think that we have had a very nice life. Again, there's been some ups and downs over time,
Sure.
Through buying some things that maybe haven't worked out or have worked out better than we thought or worse than we thought, and we've had to make adjustments along the way. But I don't think we have done anything that has made it so detrimental that we couldn't come back from it. And we've also made it to a point where things are, on an upward trajectory, and we are getting closer to retirement, and things are changing in our lives. Our daughter's in college, our son is coming up for college, so there's a lot of things going on that are going to cost us a lot more money
Sure.
than the ball games and the, smaller things. But I think that you've had your eye on the prize for a very, very long time. And that has, I guess, put us in a position where, you could see the light at the end of the tunnel on some things.
Beautiful. Thank you. So thanks for joining me. I know you have to go, so thank you for listening. We'll be back with you next week for the third of the 5-part series. In the meantime, subscribe to the Simply Financial podcast. Go to the website, www.elliottwealth.com. Get more information about me and the team and how we help our clients win with money. At the site, you could, for example, subscribe to the podcast, as well as sign up. If you're not a client of ours, sign up for a complimentary, no-cost consultation. Thank you very much. We'll be back with you next week.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of SagePoint Financial Incorporated and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. No strategy can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Please note, the information being provided is strictly as a courtesy. When you link to any of the websites provided here, you are leaving this website. We make no representation as to the completeness or accuracy of the information provided at these websites, nor is the company liable for any direct or indirect technical or system issues or any consequences arising out of your access to your use of third-party technologies, websites, information, and programs made available through this website. When you access one of these websites, you are leaving our website and assume total responsibility and risk for your use of the websites you are linking to. Securities and advisory services are offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC. Insurance services offered through Elliott Wealth Management, LLC, not affiliated with SagePoint Financial.
It was a New York scene from a small town dream. I was flying high, I was feeling fine. I won't be put in line, 'cause I'm ready to do my time.
Simply Financial is part of the Exvadio Podcast Network. You can find Exvadio podcasts at exvadio.com/podcast, the Apple Podcasts app, iTunes Store, iHeartRadio app, Spotify, Stitcher, and wherever you find podcasts. So join us and stay informed and entertained.